A band with a name like Wolverine seems apt for listening after hours, and what I mean by that is past the witching hour. Something that sounds like it should have darker purpose, a sinister edge to it. But Wolverine, unlike the Predator or unlike Chris Benoit, well, this is a group that performs progressive metal. This is a group that actually is aiming, with their brand new album Machina Viva, as well as with their albums from the past, to explore other things, such as elements of emotion within people. It is a dark place. It is definitely not one that is seen as tame, necessarily, or safe. It's instead one that is taking you to places where vulnerability begins to take over. There's a certain relation point that you get with some of the songs, not only on this album, but also in other elements of this band's discography. This is the group's third album in the past 10 years, and the one that was released 10 years to this year, back in 2006, entitled Still, while you didn't see it on this channel because it hasn't been born yet at that stage, was my album of the year, and it faced stiff competition. So, what does 2016 hold for this band? What does Machina Viva hold for a listener? The very first thing that you note on this album is the very first song spans 14 and a half minutes. It's the longest track on the album, and it's definitely one of the longest tracks that Wolverine has ever produced. So, right away, out of the gate, we are getting massiveness. And the Bedlam Overture being the name of this song, it almost sounds like it should be this the title of an introductory track that maybe lasts a minute. But instead, it's 14 and a half that gets you right into the fray. It already gets you into some of that introspective thinking. One of the keynote elements that you really recognize on this album as you flow through it is the concept of loss. The concept of going into your own mind, perhaps after the loss has occurred. Maybe retracing some steps or retracing some moments, memories, things that cause you to feel either a sense of great despair or perhaps a sense of perhaps moving on being more difficult than previously imagined, or one in which the idea seems almost impossible. The Bedlam Overture is able to swirl its way through its 14 and a half minutes, definitely showcasing some of the band's roots, which originally were with a group that had a little bit more of a death metal scene to it back whenever they first formed, but really this progressive jump that they made during the earliest days of their career has certainly served them well. It's actually one that I think fits them. So seeing these guys as a solely death metal project probably wouldn't have worked very well. Although it may have had some perhaps early Catatonia overtones, which may have been a very nice touch, kind of given the band a notable peer, or seen where the band Catatonia would have gone if they fused together their current setup as well as their elder. But the Bedlam Overture's 14 and a half minutes are ones that actually fly by relatively quickly. The music itself is able to motion itself and sort of undulate enough and cause enough thought. And really, its beauty is something that sort of entrances a listener, one that actually gets them into sort of the serial mindset that you're expected to have in order to listen to this. It's one that almost encourages a little bit of parallel thought. And what I mean by that is some of the elements of emotion that you feel within this voice that you hear that's telling the story. You start to slowly feel yourself, either that or applied of the situations that you may know. Machina sort of turns things on their heels a little bit, though, with the electronic drums, the more softer elements of this, the more electronic side of this group. It's one that is able to flow for 5 minutes and then goes into Pile of Ash. And this is one where if you've not gotten sort of into that relatability sector, if you've not kind of reached that mode yet, Pile of Ash will be the moment where you get sort of sunk headlong into this. Pile of Ash not only delivers probably one of the most devastating vocals of the year, just based off of how heart-wrenching and just how real this feels. I guess that's the best way to say it. This feels like reality, like an ode for something that is now gone, and gone forever. It's got this sort of, it somehow captures the absolute emotion, the absolute devastation, and also it captures something that is altogether difficult to explain. It captures the actual feeling that you get during those moments. So every time you listen to this, you wonder if perhaps it was written right as a great loss occurred. Either that, or you wonder just how somebody could perhaps process or create something that simulates this idea so well, and how this music is able to so accurately depict devastation in a very, very simple but very heartbreaking song that only spans a little more than 4 minutes. But it doesn't end there. Going into Our Last Goodbyes, Pledge, When the Night Comes, the concept of loss is really ebbing into the flow of reality and love. Perhaps a marriage that is dissolved, either that or a relationship that's gone sour. We get these embers, these notions that something has really caused a deception, either that or has caused someone to walk away from a very, very important life decision, a commitment. But either than that, the music itself kind of bends and weaves between these softer, more melancholic urges, and then at some points is able to rile things up and go into a more metallic signature, almost signifying that some of these emotions, some of these feelings of despair, regret, whatever they may be, it's being accompanied by anger, by rage, by this unknown feeling that is causing panic and distress. And the way that coupling process makes for an engaging listen, something that is captivating while at the same time extremely relatable. And that concept is one of the principal strengths that Machina Viva has thus far been able to really give to somebody who is opting to take the journey. When the Night Comes swirls into Nemesis, which Nemesis itself is 9 minutes and 17 seconds, and it's one that really embers and captures some of those more concrete emotions that come during the aftermath of some sort of tragedy, especially if it deals with somebody that perhaps has turned their back. It deals with some of those concepts, it seems at least, of somebody that you once trusted becoming a mortal foe. Either that, or somebody that perhaps you don't even know becoming that same foe based off of the decisions or based off of the problems that were created just by their presence, just by them being there. The one thing that I will say that this album doesn't do extremely well at some points, either that, or perhaps this is itself it's symbolic. There are some tracks on here that seem to end extremely abrupt, such as When the Night Comes, either that or even the end of Pledge. Both of these tracks feel like they should go longer than their near 8-minute time length. However, they instead just opt to finish things up very, very quickly. Perhaps that is a bit symbolic in a way. Perhaps that means just exactly what many of us think, that some of the best things that we think could last forever can be gone in an absolute instant. Shreds is the last track off of this disc, a near 7-minute ode that returns to some of those electronic hums that you heard on the title track Machina, back in track number 2. But this is one that again ends this on a very reflective note, and once again kind of dabbles back into that heartbreak. Almost as though this whole entire album was somebody cycling through sort of a revisitation of this event. And just as it seems like perhaps they were going to move past this, either that or identified one of the main causes of their bane or their ire, they instead sink back down. It feels very much almost like a panic attack that becomes depression, and then that depression somehow is able to illuminate itself up, almost like the person is starting to come out of it, only to perhaps see a photo or match a recollection, a memory that comes back, a memory that takes them right back down. It's a heartbreaking finale, and the music that really finishes this album up, the 3 minutes that you hear, while it's captivating, it is also one that sort of continues this whole idea, this thread of devastation. All in all, this may be Wolverine's most captivating album, and the captivation point is in how they're able to really grip you into the mood of the character that's being narrated about throughout this album, whether they are interconnected or not. It definitely has that feeling. The way in which that captivation point hits you is very real. And if an album is able to really match reality with its music, that is something that is almost instantaneously going to cause a connection within the listener with the band. and it's also one that almost guarantees that an album is going to be, in some ways, extremely well crafted. This caused that captivation. This actually causes you to recall tragedies of the past. It actually causes you to think about memories, perhaps of those that you loved and lost, either that or things that perhaps you have done to hurt others, or things that have affected you in a grandiose fashion and causes you a little bit of grief. It does affect your mood. It does affect your emotion. It causes a bit of a paradigm shift within your own mind. That type of captivation is rare, and that type of captivation within the construct of a true and real human emotion such as that is very rare. I mentioned that 2006, Wolverine released an album called Still, which was the album of the year for that year. To say that this album is an album of the year for 2016 is extremely far-fetched and far off. 2006 had a lot of albums that were not talked about whenever I did that list all of those years ago. It was one that was magnificently smaller than the lists that I do today. Machina Viva is actually better than Still. It's a better album, mainly because of just how well it grips you in. The strength of the songwriting intersperses and it couples very nicely with that captivation and that emotion that is granted to a listener, really whether they want it to or not. You don't have to accept this journey in order to be taken upon it. It's instead one where you're almost like on an adventure already, heading down a pathway, and then the pathway bends, twists, and turns you to this location. Almost like being in a movie where somebody, from beyond comes and showcases to you an element of your past, what it could have been, but what it ended up becoming. 94 out of 100 for this album. Tremendously captivating, deliciously good progressive metal, and all in all just a journey that you will want to take again, even though it had that effect on you, even though it had that emotional grip. Principally because if you take this journey again and again, you'll know it's coming. And the music satisfies so much that not having that same feeling as perhaps you did during your first playthrough is A-okay. Love this disc, but what did you think? Did you get a chance to check this one out? If not, I recommend that you do. So link in the description box below for you to check out a stream of this disc. My name is coverkillernation. Let me know what your thoughts are about Machina Viva by Wolverine in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.